Hey there, I'm Melissa Galbraith, the fiber artist behind MCreativeJ, and I'm so excited to finally get to share my third book with you, 3D Botanical Embroidery and Stumpwork. So let's dive in and take a look and see what's inside. The cover has a bunch of some of the projects that you can see inside, and you might have noticed a lot of them are wearable pieces, and there is one project in the hoop. So we'll open it up, see the title, and we'll keep going here. So the table of contents tells you all of the great pieces in the book here. We have introduction, techniques, tools and materials, starting and ending your stitches, a really great stitch glossary, projects, and then the book is broken down by poisonous plants, carnivorous plants, medicinal plants, and then we have patterns and an index. And then you get to see a few more projects over here. And a lovely introduction by myself. It's a little humorous and about why I wanted to write this book. So I hope you give it a read. And then we have a few more projects over here. And then we dive into techniques. So this book covers a little bit of stumpwork, Brazilian embroidery, and Indian embroidery. And it talks a little bit about these three techniques here and the history about them and how you'll get to use them in the book. And then you get a close-up of one of my thread boxes that has all sorts of fun threads in there. And then we dive into tools, materials, and prep work. So I talk about fabric. We talk about hoops over here. We talk about how to place your fabric in the hoop. Then we talk about how to transfer the pattern. And we talk about thread on this page. So in this book, we use a wide variety of threads, as you can kind of see over here. I talk about how to split the thread, and then I talk about how to cut the thread, and then I talk about how to split the thread apart. And the way I split the thread is one thread at a time, so that way you do not have it tangle up on you. And then talk about mixing thread colors over here. Then we talk about scissors and needles, and we talk about threading the needle over here, and tips and tricks and thread gloss, which I find is very helpful. Then we talk about some other things that are unique to stumpwork, which is wire, cutting wire, glue, and in this book you also get to use some fun bead embellishments. For this book, I also use a wide variety of starting and ending techniques for your stitches. So we talk about the loop start technique, the laid thread technique, the covered stitches start, and the quilter's knot, which is one that I like to use for all sorts of kind of embroidery, and then the waist knot over here. And then we talk about ending your thread on the back, so sinking the thread, slip knot, square knot. And then we dive into the stitch glossary. So with this stitch glossary, I have video tutorials, and you can scan this QR code right here to get all of the video tutorials. But this book has tons and tons of stitches in here. I packed it really full. So we have the back stitch, split back stitch, bullion knot, buttonhole stitch, corded detached buttonhole stitch. I used a bunch of fun colorful threads, so you get all sorts of colors in here. Detached buttonhole filling stitch, the cast on stitch, and then with this one there's a variation on the cast on stitch where you can use a couple different needles to make it fluffier. And then the detached cast on buttonhole petal stitch, and this one is a little funky, but it creates a cool petal in the end. It's a very fun one. Oh, I think I grabbed 2 pages there. There we go. And this is the detached cast on double needle flower, also a really funky one, but when you tie it up in the end, it creates a flower as well that is all on its own with thread. And then we talk about couching here. Trailing couching, which is another variation on couching. The detached chain or lazy daisy stitch, one of those stitches that has 2 different names. The detached chain leaf fill stitch. So this stitch is kind of filling the leaf pattern with this stitch over here. So it talks about how to do that. and then gives an example for one of the projects on how it's used. And then the detached popcorn lazy daisy stitch, so another kind of variation. This one you'll use ribbon for in another project, so it'll be fun. The drizzle stitch, and then the beaded drizzle stitch, so we'll get to use beads for that later on. The how to do a fabric slip, which is a stumpwork technique, and then we have the feather stitch over here, the fly stitch, and the closed fly stitch, and the long-tailed fly stitch right in there. Those are some variations on the fly stitch. Then we have the French knot, lacing, which is a technique for getting things nice and tight on the back, the ladder stitch, and the beaded ladder stitch. This is kind of how you get things close together and add decorative edging. Then we have the leaf stitch here. Then we do the long and short satin stitch, which is also kind of like thread painting, but a little bit different. And this is thread painting shown in a piece of stump work here. And then we talk about needle lace, which is a really cool technique you'll get to try in this book. And it really goes in depth on how to create needle lace here. We talk about needle weaving, the raised cup stitch, which is another cool 3D stitch here, the spiral trellis stitch, which is also another 3D stitch that I really like, the reverse chain stitch, the Rhodes stitch, we have the ribbed spider web, the running stitch, the satin stitch, the seed stitch, the beaded seed stitch, so some more beads right there. We have the stab stitch, so sounds dangerous, but it's actually just really easy and helpful. Stem stitch, straight stitch, tassel stitch over here, the turkey work stitch, the whip stitch, wire slip, so you might have seen some of this earlier with that thread painting, wire wrapping, and it talks about a second method here. This is kind of the one I like to use, but there are multiple methods that you can do for this. The woven picot stitch. Then there's some variations on the woven picot stitch, so one that's detached from the fabric, and this is one that is a chain that's detached from the fabric, and we'll get to use all of these, so you get to play around with them. And then we have the needle weaving bar here, and wrapping beads with thread, and that's it. So as you can see, tons and tons of pages of stitches, so you really get to dive into stitches here. And then we get into the projects. So first up is poisonous plants, and we have the foxglove pendant. So this is a cute little wearable pendant. It's a good beginner project. And as you can see, each project talks a little bit about it here, gives you the skill level and what you will need for this project, gives a good color guide here with the color and the stitches, and it also tells you where those stitches are in the glossary, and a nice lovely close-up photo of our project here. And then we dive into step-by-step instructions. So you see it'll walk you through from start to finish. Nice close-up photos here of that, seeing how we get all of this to come together till we get our finished foxglove pendant there. And then our next project is a Chinese lantern dangle earrings. So this is an intermediate project. And again, we get a diagram here, a close-up photo, and we get walked through step by step. This one uses some needle lace techniques, some wrapped beads here, plays around with jewelry, some beading. We combine different pieces together here to complete our earrings. Then we move on to a lantana brooch, which is another intermediate project. Also a bunch of needle lace here with a little bit of beading. As you can see, another beautiful close-up photo. And we get step-by-step instructions here, walking us through how to attach the backing here, and our beads, finishing up the edges so it's all nice and lovely, and then our finished brooch at the end. And then we have our white hellebore ring, another intermediate project. There's my lovely hand holding the ring there. And then our guide, what we need for this project, and a close-up of our ring here. And then we get walked through on how to create this lovely ring. Our ring setting, attaching our petals here, the back, which looks super scary right now, but I promise it all works out in the end. Putting it all together here, and then getting it into our base. And as you can see, that's kind of what it looks like at a side view, and then what it would look like if you wore it for your lovely ring there. It's a statement ring, obviously. Then we have our angel's trumpet earrings, which is an advanced project. So we get to see our earrings close up, and then another lovely large photo here. And then we get walked through again. So this one is a little bit of thread painting, kind of blending some colors here, adding some 3D, and then we are combining our projects to create some really cool 3D flowers here. As you can see, they kind of come together to create this 3D cup of a flower, and then we get to add some leaves and put it all together with our earring piece to create our earrings. And then we have a belladonna statement necklace. This is one of my favorite pieces in the book here. Another advanced project. We have our color and stitch guide, what we need for it, and a beautiful up-close photo. And we get walked through step by step. So you see what's included, like how to create our leaves, adding those lovely little veins there, taking them out, our leaves out afterwards, and then adding our different little petals, combining them together. And then, as I mentioned earlier, those chained woven picots. And then kind of starting to combine everything, putting it all together. We have some wrapped beads here, putting all of our flower pieces together. And then we start building our necklace base and putting all of our pieces onto it to create our necklace in the end, which comes together so beautifully. And then another favorite of mine is the Death Camas crown, which is another advanced project. And as you can see, materials, stitches and threads here, and another lovely close-up photo. And then we walk through. So we create our wire slip, fill it in. We have some more 3D detached stitches here. We combine them together to create really cool 3D flowers. We have some more 3D stitches and some beads. And then for this one, we are creating some super long 3D leaves here that we'll then kind of put some wire in and attach. And then we need to start creating our crown base. So we'll have some wire here. And then we kind of start combining everything together. So we attach our flowers. We start attaching our other little flowers here, and you wrap them around, just keep on adding them, and then we add our leaves, and eventually we get a very fun crown that you can wear on all sorts of special occasions or just whenever you feel like it. And then we have a monk's hood trinket box, and this is one of the first pieces I actually did for this book, another advanced project. But what you'll need, our color and stitch guide here, and then another close-up project. And then we get walked through some really lovely close-up photos here, seeing how they all come together, our leaves, the inside of the flower there, and then kind of bringing that all together, attaching all of our flower pieces, kind of building out that 3D flower, putting them together, and then creating that base for our box to put everything on, attaching it all on, and then putting it into our box to create our trinket box there. And then we get into our carnivorous plants. This is our Venus flytrap barrette, a good beginner project. So again, walks you through what you need, the different threads and materials in this one. This one has some really cool sparkly threads in there and a few beads, so it looks like the Venus flytrap has caught some bugs. But we walk through how to create these Venus flytraps, our turkey work that adds those cool little, what are they called? The little things that catch all the bugs on the edges there, which get cut down, obviously, as you can see here, but they look really scary up here before you do that. And then we sew everything together to create our little traps there. And then we create our base. I did a fun contrasting blue color from my fabric, but you can use whatever fabric you would like for this. But then we start attaching our different pieces, building our barrette, putting everything on together, and then you kind of put all of that into the barrette and make sure it's all stitched, like held down in the end. And then we move on to the carnivorous plant terrarium. This is another really cool one that combines a lot of different pieces and a few different plants in here. This is also another advanced project, but I promise it is totally worth it. So lots of different materials here, different stitches and threads you'll need for it. And then we start in on our project. So this one, I used a couple different hoops for it because I was putting everything together at once. You could do one hoop and then take everything out and then use that same hoop and put stuff in again. You don't have to have multiple hoops. But we start stitching our plants here, keep on working on adding our cool outside, using multiple colors here for our pitcher plant stems, continuing to create those here. And then we start attaching them together. So we put them into this tube that then comes together, and then they become these cool 3D plants here. And then we create our sundews here, which have these fun 3D drizzle stitches that are beaded. And then we create our dewy pines here, which are some fun bead wrapping here. As you can see, that comes together here. And then we do our terrarium base. So you get to add all sorts of fun layers to your felt, and you can add as little or as much as you want here. It's really up to you for your base, which is kind of fun. And then we start attaching our different pieces, as you can see, getting our wire in there and sewing that down and getting it all in there to create our sundew petals in there, and making sure we attach our layers together. And then once everything is attached, you glue it down onto your base to make sure it is not going anywhere. And then we have our beautiful carnivorous plant terrarium. And then from there, we move on to our medicinal plants. And this is our chamomile bracelet. So this is a really great beginner project again. If you just want to kind of dabble with some stump work and some wire slips, this is a really good place to start. It walks you through what you'll need here, again, what you're using for the project. And if you don't have some of these thread colors, you can totally find whatever you would like for them. These are also just suggestions for colors. You can use what you want. But we have a close-up of the bracelet here. And then again, walked through how we are creating our petals, then our base for our bracelet, attaching our petals, and how everything kind of gets combined, wrapped around that base, and then attached to the bracelet. And then we have our echinacea brooch. This is another fun one that I really loved creating because these cool variegated petals here. But another good beginner project, and it has some fun beading in there as well. But again, walks you through kind of blending our thread colors here. So we start at the bottom, working our way towards the middle and then towards the top. We have our filling with beading here, and then we take that out and wrap it around felt. Have another felt backing, attach everything together, and then we get our pieces together and we're all set. And then we have our ginkgo earrings here. This is another good beginner project. What you'll need, the threads we'll use. Here's a great close-up of our earrings here. And this is another good thread painting project. So you can see there's lots of different layers for our threads as we blend them together. So we start on the outside, kind of blending them down, and we get down towards the inside here using a bunch of different colors to blend. And then we take it out and kind of trim everything down. We finish our wire at the top and add our earrings. And bam, we have some ginkgo earrings. And then from there, we create a yarrow brooch. This is another good beginner project here. I think this is one of the 2 pieces that actually isn't a hoop for this book here. So what's included, the stitches and materials used here, and then another fun close-up here. And again, this one has some cool sparkly threads, so you get to play around with sparkly threads. Here we create some wire slips for our leaves. Then we have our fabric slips for some of our 3D flowers in there. And then we start with our base, adding more to that, adding more of our fabric slips, and then washing that away, and washing our stabilizer away, and then adding the rest of our leaves there. And then finishing everything up and putting on our backing here. And then this one uses a fun vintage hoop that I found. That's a 3-inch, but you can use whatever you want, you know, it's totally up to you. But I love this photo because it catches some of the cool 3D dimensionality of these petals and how the stem kind of wraps around the outer edge of the hoop too, which is, I thought, was a fun little piece for that one. And this is our dandelion layered hoop, which is an intermediate project. For this one, again, what you'll need, colors and stitch guide, and then we have our lovely close-up photo here. And from here, we get walked through. So we have our leaves, kind of our thread blending here, and then these are the 3D leaves, and this is our leaves on the base, and then this is more of the base layer and creating all of that stitching. And then this is one of the 3D layers that goes on top of that. So that's on tulle that we're stitching here. And then kind of putting everything together. So some more of our 3D portions here. These are our fun tassel flowers. And then putting that on top and adding our more stumpwork leaves here, closing up the hoop on the back, adding our backing, and there's a little more of that 3D hoop there when you're all done. And then we have our flowering sage barrette. This is an intermediate project. Again, what you'll need, color and stitch guide. And this one has those detached popcorn lazy daisy stitches I was talking about earlier with ribbon. So probably something you haven't seen before that's a little funky but cool to try out. And again, a close-up of this one over here. And this one, I didn't fill in the leaves all the way, so you get to see a little bit of that tulle in there, which I thought was kind of like a fun one for this project. So here's us creating our leaves and then putting those together. And then this one, we create our wire base first. So it's kind of like a little bit of a skeleton that we're creating. And then we add our stitches that we're adding on here. So you are putting those detached popcorn lazy daisy stitches that we're stitching onto this wire skeleton here. And then we are wrapping our thread around there to make it look like a stem. So that's kind of like a fun challenge for this piece here. And then kind of how to get our thread finished there, adding our leaves, making sure those are all nicely attached in there, finishing our barrette base and attaching our piece to that, and then the finished piece down here. And then we have our marigold headband, and this is another intermediate project. It has some really cool 3D flowers, so those fluffy cast-on stitches. Talks about what you'll need for the project, our color and stitch guide. And then this is a fun little mannequin that's wearing the headband here, so you really get to see some of those 3D cast-on stitches here, so those fluffy flowers. We also use some beads for our leaves here to add a little extra pop. But talks about how to create those flowers here so you get a really cool dimensionality with them, and then putting them together here. So we mix colors as well. And then we create our leaves, which are on wire slips, adding the beads, and then we start building our headband. So this is just on a piece of felt that I cut out. There's a template for it. But we add our leaves, kind of start adding our flowers. And then once you have everything put together, you make sure it's all stitched down. We create our headband, which talks about how to determine how much elastic you need for your headband, because everyone's head's different. And then finishing up the back so none of those pokey wires and threads get caught on your head. And then we have patterns. So all of the patterns in here are to size, but you can always change up the size as needed. So it tells you what the project is and the page you'll find them on. So we have all of our projects here for the patterns that you can easily trace. And they're not super big, which makes it easy. So they're easy to trace, and projects that aren't crazy big to like take you forever, which will be a nice way to work on them. So you see, you get all those. Then we have a lovely index that walks you through all of the like terms and stitches and everything in there. And then you get a little bit about me at the end and some more projects in there. And that is the book. And on the back, you know, a little bit more about the book, what you'll find inside, and some lovely reviews by some other amazing stitching artists. So thank you. And I hope you will check out 3D Botanical Embroidery and Stumpwork. You can find it at most bookstores, at your local library, or you can also find it at MCreativeJ.com. And thank you for giving it a look with me.